everybody, it's Katie here, and it's time to talk about Shadowhunters. So, episode 13 of season 2, Those with Demon Blood. I think this was such a powerful episode, simply because of its commentary on this divide between Shadowhunters and Downworlders. In that sense, it was a very political episode, and I'm really happy that this episode demonstrated that difference in the treatment of Shadowhunters and Downworlders. We have a lot of Downworld characters in this show, and they do work alongside the Shadowhunters a lot of the time, and I'm glad that we got such a stark reminder of how much the Downworlders are still treated less than Shadowhunters. So in this episode, the body of a murdered Shadowhunter shows up, and it looks like the Shadowhunter has been killed by a werewolf. So Jace shows up and takes Luke to the Institute for questioning. Inquisitor Herondale is still in control of the Institute for now, so she is in charge of this procedure. Although it's just Luke being questioned, it does feel like an accusation, and he makes a comment about that, because of course they're Shadowhunters. They do accuse, even in their questioning. So because of that, Luke straight away volunteers to have his DNA tested to prove that this murder was nothing to do with him, and he also says that if it is one of his own pack, that he'd kill them himself. Because obviously we know Luke, we know he just wants peace between Downworlders and Shadowhunters. He would never want somebody in his pack doing something like this. Because of that, the others decide that they will have the DNA of their Downworlder friends tested to prove their innocence as well. So Alec goes to Magnus to get a strand of his hair for the DNA test, and in his mind it's a good intention. He doesn't actually mean any harm by it. All he wants to do is prove to the Clave that Magnus is innocent of whatever's going on. Of course, that conversation does not go down very well with Magnus. You know, Magnus has been around for a long time. He has seen how much the Downworlders have had to face discrimination from Shadowhunters. He has seen a lot of shit in the Shadow World. So of course he's going to be offended by the fact that they need DNA to prove that he's innocent. And this scene between the two of them in Magnus's apartment, it starts off so well. Alex shows up and Magnus is dressed all nice. He's all sparkly. Sparkly Magnus! And they're acting very cute. And then it all goes downhill. Magnus gives over a strand of hair to Alec, but then he makes sure Alec gets straight out of there. That was so difficult to watch, because I understand Alec's point of view and the way he feels like he needs to do this, but I also understand why Magnus was so upset by it. So it was such a difficult situation. Elsewhere, we had Clary trying to get a DNA sample from Simon. This scene between the two of them was great because of what Simon said in response to Clary asking for his DNA. The story that he told about his Jewish relative. Of course, we know stuff like this from history anyway. It started off with small little things, little markers to say that they were different. And then obviously we all know how that escalated and how it ended up. So I just really appreciated that the writers put that in there. It's referencing part of Simon's character as well, part of who he is as a Jewish person. And it makes us think about how something like that must feel for him especially. So even though Clary tells Simon that Luke did it to prove his innocence, it doesn't change how Simon feels about the situation. We also have a lot of tension between Jace and Maya in this episode. Let's start with Jace. Him being a Herondale now does mean that Imogen looks upon him a little bit more favourably. She knows that she has to go back to Idris soon, so she asks Jace to take over as head of the Institute after she leaves. Even though he explains that Alec is a better person for the job, she gives the title to him because he's a Herondale, basically. What I did appreciate is that when Alec found out, he wasn't bitter about it. He just made that comment about the fact that he knew he wouldn't get given head of Institute because he was in a relationship with a Downworlder. He wasn't angry that Jace had been given the role instead of him. He was angry at the way the Clave looked less favourably on him because of his relationship with Magnus. So Jace starts stepping into this role even whilst the Inquisitor is still there. She decides that she wants to plant tracking chips in Downworlders so that Shadowhunters can keep an eye on where they are, and Jace goes along with it even though he doesn't technically agree with it. So he shows up at the Hunter's Moon and tells Maya about the tracking chip, and of course she doesn't take it well. We have this big scene between them where Maya announces to the rest of Hunter's Moon what the Clave's plan is, and obviously tensions start running high because Downworlder and Shadowhunter relations aren't good at the moment anyway. So Maya and Jace end up actually fighting. I was so proud of Maya when she punched Jace. Luke tries to interrupt the fight but gets held back by the other Downworlders because they want this fight to happen. They're sick of being accused all the time and being treated as less, but then the Shadowhunter that Jace is with does manage to get the chip into Maya's shoulder. Luke tries to tell Jace how it is by saying that he's going to end up with a war on his hands. And Jace mentions the fact that Clary was attacked earlier on in the episode, and even though she got out alive and was fine, potentially she could have been killed. But Luke doesn't let that get to him. As much as he loves Clary, he says that's not the issue. So again, it just struck me how valid the conversations the characters were having in this episode were. It raised so many good points that the Downworlders have. Later on in the episode, Maya actually gets brought to the Institute. Another Shadowhunter body showed up, and because Maya was walking home from work at the time, they assumed that she was responsible for the attack. She made such a brilliant comment in this scene when she stated that she gets followed home by cops simply for being black. I am so glad that that comment was included, because we're not just tackling issues that we have with regards to discrimination in the Shadowhunter world, but it's also taking a swipe at the situation we have in our world. Even in the real world, people are under suspicion simply for being different. So like I said before, this episode just kept raising these great valid points. Clary also finds out that Jace had tracked Maya and that he was on side with the Inquisitor when it came to this plan, and immediately Clary is not for it at all. We have this great moment where she sides with Maya against Jace and the Clave's rules, and I really appreciated that scene because it showed the two of them fighting for the same cause even though Clary's a Shadowhunter. Maya actually gets locked up with Simon, who was in the Institute because he refused to leave Clary after she was attacked. So the two of them have this really great conversation whilst they're both locked up, and I appreciate the friendship that the two of them still have, despite the fact that Simon tried to date Maya. I like that she admitted that she was getting to like Clary better, and how she told Simon not to mess up this relationship he's got going on with her. So that was a nice and more light-hearted scene. Izzy in this episode goes off to ask Raphael about taking a DNA sample. She volunteers to go to him because she knows that he would probably trust her more than any other Shadowhunter. In this episode, she admits to Jace about being a Yin-Fen addict. We also got a mention of the support group that she's now going to, which I'm really happy about because it shows that it wasn't just a one-episode thing. She does actually say that she's still going, even though she's talking about heroin. Obviously, she can't talk about the Yin-Fen, but she says that it's going well to Alec. So she comes clean to Jace about it, but she still insists on going to Raphael herself. So earlier on in the episode, we see that she is looking after Max. He's returned to the Institute to start some training, and we have this lovely scene of Izzy showing him to his room. And as much as I love Max in this show, whenever he shows up, I'm just like, oh god, please no, stay safe. I worry about that boy so much. And I had to worry a lot in this episode. Towards the end of the episode, Izzy actually does go off to find Raphael. He tells her that he's heard that Seely is behind the crimes. They end up thinking that it's Meliorn. Whilst they're going off to find him, Max appears. Even though Izzy had told him to stay in the Institute, earlier on in the episode he had been saying that he wants to get out there and get on with things. He wants to be doing what the other Shadowhunters do. So he has sneaked out and followed her so that he can join in. Izzy tells him to stay put whilst her and Raphael go find Meliorn. They do find him right by another dead body, so obviously it looks suspicious. He insists that it is a Seely, but it's not him. You do have this tense standoff between the three of them, but in the end, Izzy chooses to believe Meliorn. When the three of them walk back to where Max isn't there. He has been taken by the real attacker, who is a Seelie named Kaylee, I think that was her name, but she is the one who is behind all of the killings. Her brother died when Jace ignited the Soul Sword, so this is her revenge against the Shadowhunters. She has been faking the attacks to make it look like it's from different Downworlders when actually it's just from her. Thankfully, Meliorn, Izzy and Raphael show up and stop her. But oh my god, I thought Max was a goner for a little while there, especially before we knew who the attacker was. I did worry a lot, thinking that maybe this was it for Max, and that they were just doing it very differently from the book. Thankfully, that wasn't the case. Max got out alive this time. Oh, what I forgot to mention before as well, when Izzy was asking Raphael for his DNA, he assured her that a vampire wasn't behind the attacks. He said it was because centuries ago, Shadowhunters used to hunt Downworlders for fun, and he explained how they would collect mementos from their victims as proof that they had successfully hunted and killed Downworlders. And because of that, the vampires promised that they would never put another person through something like that, because these victims were showing up with their runes cut off. That's how he knew it wasn't vampires. I'm so glad that he told that story, because again, it's showing a darker side to the Shadowhunters and their history. They might be seen as these warrior heroes that protect mundanes and keep the world safe, but they have their ugly side. So it showed what Shadowhunters used to be like with regards to their treatment of Downworlders, and although they have progressed, they still treat them as less. So yeah, those constant references to that divide throughout this episode were really brilliant, and I think the writers did a fantastic job of getting all of that across. It showed us a bit more about the politics of the Shadow World. I think it was a really solid episode, and it tested the characters and the relationship between them, and it showed us how they resolved that in the end and moved forward from that. A few other things that were going on in this episode away from that. We had a little storyline between Magnus and Dot. She shows up at his apartment after what happened with Alec, and the two of them end up drinking together. The conversation that the two of them had was really great. When they were talking about their shared history and people that they've dated, and showed this nice and funny relationship between the two of them. And we found out that they had a fling as well. But you could tell throughout this episode that there was something more going on between them. It did feel more one-sided towards Dot as she was getting quite flirty with him. They ended up dancing. I was really happy that we got to see a dancing Magnus, because we've known that it was going to happen for a while. Any dancing from Harisham Jr. is just great to watch, no matter what character he's playing, because obviously dancing is one of his professions. So I was happy that he got to bring that in, but in a small way. It was just a fun and light-hearted scene. After the two of them stop dancing, Dot does try to kiss Magnus, but he stops her and he rejects her because he's in love with Alec. So I'm very glad that that situation reminded him of how much he loves Alec. And at the end of the episode, when Alec comes to Magnus to admit that he was wrong, we have a mutual I love you from the two of them. So although we got some Malik drama in this episode, it was all resolved by the end of it. Also, Jace hands over the head of the Institute job to Alec, because Inquisitor Herondale has gone now. She's back in Idris, she's left Jace in charge. He decides that the job needs to be Alec's. I'm very excited to see him head of the Institute. It's going to test him in new ways, so I can't wait to see where that storyline goes. Another scene that I really loved in this episode is the conversation between Simon and Luke. Luke acts like such a father figure to Simon, and I just love their relationship. When Simon is talking about how much he wants this normal life where he goes to college and spends time with his girlfriend, Luke asks him if they're being safe, and Simon assumes that he's heading towards the talk. So he starts mumbling about him being a vampire, so he didn't think he could get Clary pregnant. But Luke didn't mean that at all. He just wanted to make sure that Simon wasn't getting too overwhelmed to the point that he might try and bite Clary. I just thought that was a really funny scene. I love all scenes between Luke and Simon, they are great. And we also got Simon singing in this episode. He's been going on about his band or lack of a band throughout the episode. So at the end he actually puts on a little performance in Hunter's Moon. So it was great to see Alberto showcase his talent as a singer as well. So that was a nice way to end the episode. One last thing that I forgot to mention, Jace and Maya. Okay then! At the start of the episode they were getting along really well in Hunter's Moon. Considering they'd been through quite a lot of trouble before, they seemed to have moved past that. They were being really friendly and fun with each other, but then obviously the whole tracking thing happened and shit went down. But then at the very end of the episode, Jace took the tracking chip out of Maya and apologised for the way he'd been acting. Maya made some comments about him being in love with Clary, and of course he just completely denied that. So then Maya asks him to prove that he's not in love with Clary, and they end up getting it on a little bit. Well, you know, it's more than a little bit. That was quite a steamy scene. Weirdly enough, in the first half of the season, some of the scenes between Jace and Maya made me think that they'd be quite compatible together. I liked that they had quite a sharp attitude towards each other. So I'm actually quite happy that the show has put them together, even though they've established that it's just a casual thing and that it doesn't have any meaning. I think it's going to be interesting for their characters, so I am looking forward to seeing what the show does with that. So let's talk about the promo for next week. We're getting the Sealy Court! It's happening! It is happening. We knew we were getting the Sealy Court at some point in season 2. We're finally going to see it in next week's episode, and I am very excited. The shots of it in the promo look really great. We haven't seen much of it, just a few quick flashes, but it looks a lot like how I pictured it in the books. I can't wait to see more of it. So yeah, I am very excited for next week's episode. I think I've mentioned everything that I want to talk about. If there is anything that you want to discuss, feel free to leave it down in the comments. Also tell me what you thought of that promo. Let me know all of your thoughts on this episode. I will see you guys next week. Thank you so much for watching. Bye!